Hello, everyone. For those that are new, I'm Bandish, the founder of The Curious Mindset, a private community for technology leadership teams powered by 64 Tech, an IT solutions provider of hardware, cloud, and IT services. Although we're powered by 64 Tech, our core principle is to always give more than we take. Rest assured, you won't be bombarded with sales pitches. Please do follow our dedicated LinkedIn page to stay updated on how 64 Tech can assist you with any technology challenges that you may face, or if you're looking to shake up things with your current IT suppliers. Now, while 64 Tech provides technology solutions, some of the biggest challenges technology leaders face are human challenges, not technical. As leaders, there's often pressure to appear all-knowing, which makes it really hard to admit what we don't know or ask questions that allow us to be vulnerable. The Curious Mindset was created to help us build the essential people and leadership skills we didn't know we needed. This community grew out of my own experience and desire to help others overcome the challenges that I faced when I became a leader. I know firsthand how isolating leadership can be, and our North Star here is that no one leads alone. At 64 Tech, the mantra is together we grow, and the Curious Mindset is how we can make that happen. This is a space for us to learn, to share, and to become more confident as technology leaders. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our host, Mr. Andy McMenemy, our technology leader co-host, Steve Maxwell, and our special guest, David Hutchens.
Banish, thank you so much for that introduction. And, you know, it's absolutely fair to say the only reason I'm sat here today is because of you and the generosity of 64 Tech by choosing to use your marketing spend, your budget to create this wonderful community. And, you know, maybe a lot of people might not know, but I was invited as a guest speaker a long, long time ago, a number of years ago now, to share my story and my journey of discovery from, you know, very high level corporate management and leadership into extreme endurance. And I shared a story of inspiration. So I guess stories are the theme and stories are the link that are going to run all the way through today. And I'm not going to steal any more time from our wonderful guests today. I'm delighted, everyone, to introduce you to David Hutchens, who's going to really give us some fascinating insights across all aspects of business and all aspects of our ability to elevate ourselves as leaders through the power of stories. David, welcome to the Curious Mindset.
Thank you very much, Andy and Bandish and Bryony and team. I'm delighted to be here.
So, David, the power of stories is just fascinating. I mean, before even we had the book, right? We communicated via the power of stories to transfer information and translate information. What's been your I guess, journey into stories, and what are some of the nuggets and of the golden nuggets of wisdom that you've identified through the power of storytelling?
So the journey is I actually began my career in advertising. I was a copywriter, and then I worked as a speechwriter for the CEO at Coca-Cola and other places. And so I've been telling stories from the beginning. And I learned early in that work as an advertiser, if you tell a story, people will buy more Coca-Cola, right? And now I'm bringing this same idea to organizational leadership. And now instead of moving hamburgers and soft drinks through the system, now we're helping ideas move through organizational systems by using this more human language that is storytelling.
And I guess the holidays are coming, right?
The holidays are coming. We'll all sit around the table and start telling stories to each other. No one has to tell you to do this. This is a capability that already lives in your brain. You know, this isn't about presentation skills or becoming a better public speaker. This is a leadership skill. Story is your brain's operating system for making sense of the world. And all we're doing as tech leaders is bringing this capability that we already have and being more thoughtful about connecting it to the work that we need to move through the world.
And I guess, you know, that simple phrase that was coined by Coca-Cola, the holidays are coming, there is a whole story behind that unfolds, isn't there? It's just one statement, but everybody knows the story, right?
Everyone, again, marketers know about this. What story is the language that sticks in your body. You know, data and slides evaporate from your brain minutes after the presentation. What are the key messages that you need to move through the system? Let's strategically take those messages and put them inside memorable stories that will stay with people for a really long time.
I'm fascinated. Please share more with us, David.
Okay, good. Well, so yeah, my work is to go around the world and help leaders tell stories. And it's a simple idea that when we use this language that is narrative, that something different happens, that there's a different kind of connection, a powerful connection that happens. And we can use that. We can bring this more human moment of connection into more parts of the work that we care about. And Andy, I thought today what I might do is share some examples of what this can sound like, and kind of start giving your team and your community a vision for what would it sound like if we told technology stories, because most of my work is technology. I'm working with Cisco systems and NASA and PayPal and really smart people. Some of them have like double PhDs, right? And they're really good at talking to each other. But at some point, you need to turn and start inviting other people into the conversation. And story is the language that allows you to do that. So today, I thought I would share a few examples of how some other groups are using this capability to start giving your community the vision.
Fantastic. So we're going to get the benefit of best practice from some of the leading brands in the world. I love it. Thank you.
Got it. You got it. So one of the resources that I use when I work with groups is this. It's called the Leadership Story Deck. It's what it sounds like. It's a deck of cards. It's dozens of ideas of different stories that you could be connecting to different kinds of challenges, and including identity and culture, including sales, strategy, transformation work. We're focusing on technology stories. So I've drawn from the deck several technology stories that I can share with your community today. The first one that I'll start with, this is a great story to tell. This is card number 10 from the deck, Origin of the Vision. I know a guy with a problem. A lot of technology leaders are telling this story. They'll like create a persona, right? Meet Jane. Jane has 3 children, and every day you can do that, but your audience knows that that's not a real person. So the empathy switch stays turned off. We need real people. So let me show you an example of what this story can sound like. Origin of the Vision. This guy is named Doug Dietz. He is a industrial designer with GE Healthcare. And here's a story that I heard him tell. It's an origin of the vision. Here's how he tells this story. Doug says, for my team and I were working for a couple of years to build a new state-of-the-art MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. And we had been working on this thing for a couple of years, and we were really proud of it. We'd worked on all the coils and the displays and the enclosures. And we had an opportunity to go to a hospital to actually see our MRI in its environment. So we were excited about that. Good, we get to watch this thing in action now, right? And so they were there in the hospital, and while they were checking out the machine, a technologist comes in. And she goes, hey, Doug, we have a patient coming in. Would you mind kind of stepping aside a little bit? And Doug goes, ooh, this is even better, right? We get to see it in action now. And so he goes out into the hallway. And Doug says when he stepped out there, and this woman was walking up with a little girl. And this little girl was just weeping. And her mother gets down on her knees and talks to her and says, sweetheart, remember we talked about this. You have to be brave. We can do this. I will stay with you. And Doug says he followed the little girl and her mother back into the MRI suite. And now this room where he had been celebrating a few minutes earlier suddenly looked different to him. Now he noticed all the buzzing sounds and the flickering fluorescent lights. And that's even before the MRI starts up and makes that terrifying sound that it makes, right? And Doug said, that's when I realized that I had failed in my job as a designer, because I had failed to understand the needs of children who are very much a part of this target audience. And what I learned, he said, was that in this modality of nuclear medicine, about 80% of children have to be sedated because they're afraid. And the technologist said, oh yeah, we watch the parents carry their sedated children out to the parking lot afterwards. And Doug said, that's when I knew I failed, and I needed to understand the anxiety and the psychology of children. And this became our new challenge as designers.
Wow. And what a masterful delivery, because you had me hanging on every word, waiting to hear what was coming next in that story.
Right. And in this story, it kind of ends, it's a little bit of a downer, right? He got it wrong. He got the message wrong. So we'll talk more about this. One thing you can do is you start taking multiple stories and sequencing them together. You know, Doug is standing on a stage. Let me show you where this story lands, because he comes back and tells another story later. Here's the evolution of the MRI suite. And in that, I want to go crawl in that donut right now, don't you? So you know, a story is a tension. We create this tension and we want this resolution. And so Doug does a beautiful job with that, with the next story that he tells. But yes, if that worked for each of you, what Andy just described, that, ooh, I wanted to hear what was coming next, there is neuroscience, Andy, that describes what you just said. And you know, speaking of MRIs, if we were to take a storyteller and put them inside one of Doug's MRI scanners, what we would see is that their brain is really active. When we use this language that's narrative, our brain is really active. Here's the fascinating part. When we put an audience member, somebody listening to the story in the MRI, what we find is that their brain lights up in a pattern nearly identical to the teller's. And it's a phenomenon called neural coupling. Some call it neural entrainment. Our brain, at some level, if you liked that story, if that was working, at some level, your brain changed shape to become like my brain. This neural coupling connection is really powerful. And data doesn't create this. Slides don't create this. Stories create this. Yeah, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, so we kind of synchronize, right? We synchronize, and I get onto your wavelength, and I'm there with you as you're telling the story, and the energy flows.
Synchronizing is absolutely the right word. In fact, the neuroscientist who shows this is a guy named Yuri Hassan, and he has a TED Talk if you want to go look it up, but he actually shows that synchronization happening in real time. It's really cool to see it. You know, at the beginning, you see the teller and the listener and their brain waves are doing this. And then when they go into story, you see the entrainment start to happen. So go check out that TED Talk. Yuri Hassan, he's a neuroscientist at Princeton.
And I guess the whole thing about this is that it's we're linking emotions, aren't we? Through the power of story. We're taking people on an emotional journey with us to the end point that we've predetermined, right?
That emotion content is core. And this is what makes this skill difficult for a lot of the science leaders that I work with, because, you know, we've been taught push the emotion out. You know, emotion only compromises data. It compromises how we think. No, emotion is critical to how we think, and especially if you're in an environment of influence where you're trying to move work forward, and if the system isn't moving, often that's for all the human reasons. People don't like it. People don't trust it. They're scared. They're mad. They like things the way they are. There are these invisible emotion currents in your system all the time. Story is the lever that allows you to speak to those emotion currents.
Wow, amazing. And you know, the relevance here, I think, for our audience, David, is that many of our tech leaders won't see themselves as salespeople, but they have to convince people to buy into their strategy. They've got to buy into their ideology of how to do the job the very best way for the business, and also for the resources they've got available. And I guess the only way you can do that is influence their emotions, right? Through the power of story.
Exactly. This isn't selling. This is leading. A leader is somebody who points to the future and says, I think we should go this way. And then you turn and say to other people, come with me. To do that, we need this different kind of language, this more human language that's narrative, which is the language of leadership.
Sure. And how innovative do you have to be then, David, to sort of start to have the headspace to think about, how am I going to tell a story that's going to influence someone in the direction I want them to go? Where does that come from?
It comes from intentionality. This is strategic. If you met your friends for drinks last night, or if you sat down at the table with your family, you told stories. Nobody told you to do this. Nobody said, to create bonds of connection with your friends or family members, narrative language would create. We do this naturally, but we're not doing it when we step into the organizational system. And so the intentionality of, there's work that I care about, I need to move through the world. I don't need people to just understand it. I need them to believe and be excited, be engaged. Those are emotion words. We need this emotion language. So the way I approach this is strategic. We're not telling stories because it's fun, because it feels good. We're telling stories because there's something we need to happen. And so we start with that outcome, and then we work backwards. What are the narrative assets, the value holding stories that will get us to that outcome that we're looking for?
Wonderful. Can you give us some examples?
I've got more. I've got lots of stories.
Great.
So, okay, here's a good one. This is card number 1 in the leadership story deck. It's called A Leader with Conviction. There's a reason I'm here. This one's a personal story. Not all the stories that we tell as leaders will be about us. A lot of them will be about the team or the customer or the partners, but some of them are personal. And there's a reason why this is card number 1 in the deck. It's the first card. It's a really flexible story. Tell us why you're here. Why do you care about the work? And the why I'm here story can be why this organization, or why this industry. You have a new why I'm here story every time there's a new project, the new thing we're bringing forward. There's a reason I care about this. Let me tell you why I care about this. And the idea is that when we see your belief is socially transferable. Your belief becomes our belief as well. And so one of the features of the story deck is on the back is an example of what these stories sound like. These are all real stories that I've heard people tell. This one is, I'm going to read the example on this card. And this is from a guy in Munich. I did a project with Microsoft in Munich, Germany. I still remember the guy. It was a young guy. This is the story that he told. Here's his why I'm here story. Tell me what you notice about this. Oh, I don't have enough light on in here. Okay, I'm going to have to, there we go. Here's what this young guy said. He stepped up in front of the group and goes, I started my career as a paramedic. And I remember my first night out in an ambulance. I was just 23 years old at the time. And we responded to a call for a car accident. And it was a girl whose car had flipped and went into a ditch. And she was unconscious. And we did everything we could to save her, but we couldn't find any medical information on her. We couldn't give her blood or medication, and she died while I was searching through her purse. With data, we could have saved her. It made me angry. And so I went back to school and got my master's degree in healthcare informatics. And the reason I joined this team is because these people share that same feeling of urgency for bringing actionable data to healthcare. I can't help that girl in the car for my first night as a paramedic, but we have helped a lot of people since then. And working with this team, I intend to help many, many more.
Wow. How powerful is that? And, I was instantly hooked on, I was curious, I wanted to know what was coming next in that part of the story. It was just the way that he's sharing that story. It kind of engages you. You want to go with him on the journey. You're curious about what's coming next. And of course, it leads to legacy, doesn't it? As he said, the legacy of the story is the action you want people to take, right?
Exactly. So that's a great call out, because when I work with leaders and we're developing these story assets, that last piece, in his case, it was, I believe in this team and there's a reason I'm on this team. I call that the reason I told you this story. There's something I want you to know. And when I work with leaders, that's where we spend the most time, is that invitation that comes at the end. I think in terms of believe, feel, or do language. Believe. I want you to believe that we're the team that deserves the budget because we deliver creativity over and over again. Feel. I want you to feel proud to be on my team. You know, that this was a feel story. Or do. Try the new feature, sign the contract, hire us, embrace the change, join the movement, invite people to do something. In marketing terms, this is call to action, right? We're telling this story because there's something we want to happen. We start there and then we work backwards and make sure that the story gets us to that call to action.
Which is a seamless link into Simon Sinek's start with the reason why. I guess so when you're crafting your story, it's what action do I want them to take? Why do I need them to take that action? And how am I going to engage them in that process, right?
This is Sinek's why language. Absolutely. A lot of people hear that TED talk, you know, the three circles, and they love it. And they say, I still don't know how to answer the why question. Story is the language of why. You know, tell me why we're doing this thing because of something that happened. Let me tell you what that was. So when we're in a why space, you're exactly right, Andy. That is an invitation for story.
And I guess there can also be the positive story or the negative story, which would be the consequences of inaction. So I guess if we want someone to make a decision in our favor, we need to understand whether I'm taking them towards a reward or taking them away from pain, which would be the consequence of inaction. And I guess you would tell a story linked to, you know, here's what somebody didn't do.
Exactly. As long as that emotion content is in there, you know, the GE healthcare story, the MRI story, ended on kind of a downer note, and then I rescued you with some positive emotion. This is an area where I'm doing a lot of research right now. Actually, I'm glad you brought this up: the role of negative emotion and the role of positive emotion. You know, there's a whole body of organizational development theory called appreciative inquiry, where we're focusing on the us at our best stories. So there is a focus on those positive stories because those are especially good at aligning people and moving the system forward. The us at our best stories are good ones to tell. But that doesn't mean that the problem stories go away or that the negative stories go away. What we do is we take those negative stories and we turn them into learning stories. You know, GE Healthcare, yeah, there was some sadness in there, but then we turned it into change and transformation and opportunity. And so that feels a lot better. And the theory is that that's better for moving the system forward.
But ultimately, it's all about the power of connection, isn't it?
This is your most human technology that you possess. And you're right. This is connection. This connects us to each other. When I bring teams together and we sit in a circle and take turns telling stories to each other, afterwards, people always say, oh my God, what just happened? Like people say, I've been working with this guy for 7 years. I feel like I learned more about him in 15 minutes because we told stories. What just happened here? It's connection. It's neural coupling. It's emotion. It's rationality, spirit, emotion, all coming together in this most human capability. Yeah, it's powerful stuff when we bring this into the work.
And it's something that I have shared with clients that want to speak. You know, they have to speak for their career. They have to be able to communicate well. And they're often worried about the complex data they need to communicate. And I said, look, you don't need notes to tell your own story. Your story is viable, it's valid, it's why you're here today. And just share your story. You can send them handouts with the notes, right? The technical stuff, right? But just share your story. You can do that from here, and you can do it from here, the heart, right?
We had this exact conversation just recently. I was with Accenture in London, and we were talking about exactly that. We said, just what if we got rid of the slides? And people freaked out. What? We can't get rid of the slides. And it was more of a thought experiment. We're like, yeah, I know we still need them, but slides become an addiction. And what if we turned those off and simply looked at our audience and talked about things that we knew about and things that we care about, things that happen to us? And so when we practice that, it's exactly like you just said, Andy. People say, wow, this is actually easier than having an Excel spreadsheet full of data up on the wall and I have to keep looking at it. Now I'm just talking about things that I know. Not only is it easier, not only does it feel better, but it's also more engaging and gets you the results that you want.
Wonderful. David, one of the things you shared with me and that resonated with you, and I'm very curious to understand where you're going to go with this, is something called the bridge to innovation. Talk to us about that.
Okay. This is a great innovation story. This one's in the deck, card number 12, the bridge to innovation. Let's apply an old idea in a new way. And so the idea behind this story is most of us think of innovation, well, the general public thinks of innovation of, Steve Jobs standing on a stage and he pulls an iPod out of his pocket. Oh, whoa, the world just changed. This radical new thing that disrupts everything. Most innovation, as you know, are these small incremental moments where we took something that was working over here, and what if we applied it a little bit differently? What if we modified it? And so this is a process story. Now we're not just telling stories about the thing that we're bringing forward, the new feature, the new app, the new project, the new value proposition. Now we're telling the story of the people. Stories are about people. Put you in the story, put the team in the story. Let us see the team thinking. Let us see the team solving problems. We're not just buying the new thing. We're buying your team's capability to create. And so we need to see the people. So here's a story of what that can look like. This is one of my favorite stories in the story deck. So listen to this. Here's how this story goes. So we were working for a military contractor to redesign the navigation for some of their land and sea vehicles, including their submarines. And their old controls were clunky and made it really hard to steer the vehicles. And all of the officers hated them. And making even simple repairs could cost tens of thousands of dollars. Well, one night, one of my team members, Carter, was at home and his 9-year-old son was playing a video game in which he was steering a military tank. And Carter came to work the next day with the game controller. He said, guys, you might think I'm crazy, but, well, the idea of using game controllers to steer real submarines was a hit with our officers, especially junior officers who grew up playing video games and were instantly comfortable with the controls. Even better, when we need to repair or replace the controls, instead of spending thousands of dollars, we can buy a new one from the video game store for less than $60. That's the secret of success at our firm. We find solutions in unexpected places, and sometimes the craziest solutions turn out to be the best.
Wow. That links into innovation, doesn't it? Because it's an innovative solution to a challenge a leader was facing, right?
Everyone on this team, as you're creating, as you're building the new thing, there was a moment where you or where the team member got stuck and said, okay, I don't see the solution. So you tried something and that didn't work. And then you tried something else and that didn't work either. And that's when one team member said, this might be crazy. What if we did it this way? That's a story. That's a story you should bring forward. Here in the US, I think you have this in the UK, crime shows like Law and Order or CSI New York, those shows have been on the air for 20 years, 30 years. They keep making new ones. And it's because we love to watch people solve problems. Mm. You are leaders who solve amazing problems. If you would bring us into that, we would be inspired. We would love what you're doing. And then we would say, show us more. So that's the bridge to innovation story. One of the things that's cool about this is I got a phone call a few months ago, and it was a guy at the Navy Innovation, U.S. Navy Innovation. He said, hey, Dave, I have your story deck. I saw that card. That was my team. That was my team who did that. And at first I thought I was in trouble. I was like, ooh, I hope that's okay. But it was in the news, which is where I saw this. So now I'm in dialogue with the Navy Innovation Center. How cool is that? So I got to meet the guy who's behind that story.
Well, that's in itself, that is a wonderful story, right?
How cool is that? I know. Yeah.
So give us some insight, maybe from more of a technical I mean, I guess there is no more place on the planet where innovation and technology meet each other than at NASA, right?
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of work with NASA, specifically climate science. And here in the US, it's a government organization. They have to go to Congress and ask for their budget. And so they've been going to Congress with their science slides, these data plot graphs that show methane in the atmosphere. And when they show those slides to me, I feel dumb. I don't understand those slides. And US congressmen definitely don't understand the slides. And so now we're using this different language. They're bringing stories to Congress. And they said, oh my God, Dave, we should have been doing this all along. We're getting the budget now. And it's as simple as, data doesn't go away. Some people pit data and stories against each other. No, data doesn't go away. We still need that data. But story is the glue. It's the context language that helps people who stand outside of your system make sense of the data. And so, yeah, they're telling stories at NASA, not only to get the budget externally, but also internally to move their different innovations forward. I have
you're
lost
on mute there, Andy. Yeah, Andy, I think you're on
I
mute.
didn't hear you for a moment.
Oh, my apologies. I was just coughing earlier. So, yeah, so I was saying, I guess crafting the story in line with the desired outcome is the most important aspect of that, right?
It's starting with there's something that we need to happen in the world. And in the case of innovation leaders, there's something new that we're bringing forward, and everybody wants the new thing until they see it. And then they say, oh, I didn't realize I was going to have to change my behaviors. I didn't realize I was going to have to think differently. I didn't realize I was going to have to let go of some old processes. I don't like that. And now the emotion currents that are in the system are impeding the work, and we need to speak to those emotion currents. Whenever I work with technology leaders, we have this conversation. We'll say, organizations are emotional systems. And I actually had that conversation with that group, the Accenture group. They didn't like it. It kind of made them mad a little bit. They're like, no, we're really smart around here. And I said, I know you're really smart, but think about the work that's stuck, that's not moving forward. It's because of these human elements that's emotion. And again, we need to step into this stream of emotion and be able to work with that so that we can move the work forward.
It's really powerful. David, I'm curious. I'm listening to all of this and it's all resonating with me. I absolutely know it will be resonating with our audience, tech leaders who, have the power of or have the need to have the power to convince people. What's a personal story for you that you're most proud of that's come out of your journey in teaching people how to tell stories?
So a moment that was specifically powerful for me. Okay, here's one. I've got lots of those. So back in the early 2000s, when I was still living I'm in the United States. You may have figured out I'm an American. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where Coca-Cola is headquartered. And I had wanted to work with Coca-Cola for a long time. And finally, I got a call one day. Hey, Dave, we heard that you do communications work. We have a challenge for you. So I drove over to Coke and I was excited to be there. And here's the challenge that they shared with me. At the time, Coca-Cola was on this system-wide transformation journey to become what was known as a learning organization. And for those of you with a little bit of gray hair, you might remember Peter Senge and the fifth discipline, systems theory, mental models. And it's this kind of academic body of work. And they said early in our journey here at Coke, we've run into a problem that nobody understands what we're talking about when we say we want to be a learning organization. And can you help us create a communication solution that will help people understand what a learning organization is? And I was like, oh yeah, of course I can do that. And I drove home and I panicked because I had no idea how to do this. And, I read Peter Senge and the fifth discipline. I'm like, I can't write a better book than that. And so I kind of just, not with any other options, I created a new document on my computer and I wrote the words, once upon a time, there was a wolf. And I started writing this silly story about a flock of sheep that outwits a pack of hungry wolves. And in the process, they become a learning organization and display all those capabilities. And this thing was so crazy. I had a friend who is a children's book illustrator. And I called him, I said, hey, Bobby, you got to draw me some crazy pictures. And I dropped him into this manuscript. I called it Outlearning the Wolves, Surviving in a Learning Organization. And I thought, I'm going to get so fired from Coca-Cola for this. And I didn't get fired. What happened was a publisher picked it up. And now that crazy book has sold like 250,000 copies, and it's in lots of different languages. It's in over a dozen languages. And now this crazy story that I thought was going to get me fired from Coca-Cola, now it's gone all over the world, and it's helping people in lots of cultures have a conversation about what does it mean to be a learning organization. And that was really the moment, Andy, where, I was a young guy, I was, early 2000s, I was in my 20s. And that was the moment where I paused and said, all right, what just happened here? Why did that work? And, in the early 2000s, people weren't really talking about storytelling yet. It was still a weird idea at the time. And that was kind of the moment I said, okay, I think I'm going to focus on this. I think there's something here that's really rich. And it's one of the few times I've been ahead of the curve, because now everybody's talking about this idea. But yeah, I've been telling stories from the very beginning, since advertising, and now helping ideas move.
What I liked about that, David, is that the metaphors are transferable, aren't they?
Yeah, so you're right. I've introduced a new type of story, the fable, the metaphorical story. There wasn't really a pack of wolves and a flock of sheep. Now we're using metaphorical storytelling. That's good to do when we're introducing an idea that's so alien that there's no counterpart internally that we can point to. If you look around and say, I can't find a story that illustrates what we're trying to do, it doesn't exist yet. Okay, let's use metaphor. Let's use an imagined world, and that can be a really powerful way to do that.
And every single one of us, David, I know, because I'm a clinical therapist and psychotherapist, and I know every single one of us tell ourselves stories, up here in our own dialogue, and they can be empowering stories or they can be limiting stories. But the power of stories is universal. And learning to use it as a leader is probably the only thing you can do to unlock those blockages you just can't seem to get through, right?
Right. So my wife is a marriage and family therapist as well. So what you and my wife know is that after you tell the story, the work is only just beginning. A lot of leaders think, okay, I told the story. Now people are going to buy. Now people are going to align and engage. No, the story is not the end of the conversation. The story is the beginning of the conversation, because then you get to invite the team or the system to become interpretive community. What did you hear in that story? What do you think it means? What is some actionable wisdom? What did you hear in there what's the new idea that you could take out of that story? If more people would do what Doug at GE Healthcare did, if more people on our team would do that, think how resilient and creative we would be. What would that look like? So now we are having the sense-making, knowledge-generating dialogue, and story gets you to that knowledge work really quickly.
And I guess the thing is, we have to get out of our own way in order to be able to do that, right?
You have to get out of your way, and you have to slow down a little bit. One of my favorite things to do is to bring teams together and sit them in circles of 4 and say, tell me about a time when. And you get to design what the strategic story circle looks like. Tell me about a time when we brought one of our values to life in a way that made you proud. Tell me about a time when you saw one of our team members go the extra mile to serve a customer. Tell me about a time when you felt most engaged or happiest doing this work, right? Whatever the topic is. And then they take turns and they go in a circle and tell stories in that conversation. Takes about 20 to 30 minutes, which to me is really short. But if you're a really fast moving technology leader, you're going, ooh, wow, this is right. So you have to slow down and create space for this different kind of language to come in. This is a slow down to go fast technology.
Yeah.
because now we're aligned. Now we're neurally coupled. Now we all have the same muscle memory of how things get done around here. Now we can move forward with greater alignment.
And I guess because they're evidence-based stories, by definition, tell me a time about when there is evidence there and there's substantial, we're able to substantiate it, then I guess the buy-in is a lot more stronger because they feel safer, right? Because it's evidence-based.
Yeah, there's lots of case studies about this. A lot of my work is change and transformation. You're right. People are more engaged. They feel safer. One of the great thinkers in the story space, Steve Denning, was a leader at World Bank back in the late 1990s. And he had caught the vision for this new idea at the time that was known as knowledge management. Right now, it's an entire industry, but it was a new idea back in the 1990s. And Steve said he went around World Bank trying to create interest and energy and traction, saying, I think we need to invest in this new thing. And he couldn't get any interest around it. And he was frustrated. And one day, Steve Denning stepped up in front of an audience. And he said, for the first time, he changed his message. He did something different with this presentation. He started with the story. I remember the story he told. It went like this. He stood up in front of a group. And he goes, in Zambia, Africa, there is a tiny healthcare clinic that it was facing a new strain of malaria, and there was no protocols to treat this malaria. And one thing they didn't have a lot of resources, but one thing they did have, this is the 90s, remember, they had a dial-up modem. And they could dial into the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, and download quickly some new treatments for this new strain of malaria. And Steve said, what's significant about this story is that we're not in it. And that capability that tiny healthcare clinic had, we don't have that capability anywhere inside World Bank. Imagine if we did. Mm-hmm. Think what an organization we could become. And then he went on with the rest of his presentation that he normally delivered. And Steve said, for the first time at the end of the presentation, instead of everybody leaving the auditorium, they all came to the stage and they surrounded him and said, why don't we have this capability? What's the holdup? They're like blaming him. What's the holdup? What do we have to do to make this happen? And Steve was stunned. He said, the only thing I did different was I introduced the Zambia story. And so he went to the next office at World Bank. He said, I'm going to try that again. He told the Zambia story again, and he got the same result. Steve Denning says the Zambia story is what triggered transformational change at World Bank so that today they are a global leader in the modern knowledge management movement. Denning says without the Zambia story, it would not have happened. So there's an example of a single narrative asset sparking massive transformation within a system. That's wild, isn't it?
It absolutely is. But it's also incredibly seamlessly linked to what we see every day in the news, what we probably read when we read a newspaper. The journalists learn this skill of telling a story through what we call Kipling's friends, which is the who, the where, the why, the what, and the when, right?
Yeah, journalists already know about this. Politicians know this. There's a dark side to this skill. I don't know if you're paying attention to the American political discourse right now, but there's a very dark side to this. And people use this because it is that powerful. It's really powerful.
It is the power of communication through story.
Yeah, through story and through human connection and emotional language.
David, you're truly fascinating. I could listen to you all day. I mean that sincerely.
Isn't it fun? It's a fun topic. And the reason it's fascinating is because I'm telling you stories. You have this capability as well. I'm kind of an emotional American. I'm a little over the top. You don't have to sound like me when you do this. When you do this well, it'll just sound like you. It should be your voice. Don't adopt the voice of a performer. Just talk about the things that happened. It'll be a more powerful, more engaging version of you, but you'll sound like you when you do this well.
Thank you so much, David. I'm conscious of time, and I know I can see there are a lot of questions coming into the chat. So I'm going to invite everybody to go to gallery mode so we can